Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bison postgame show presented by Gate City Bank. I'm Logan Campbell. Kyle Emanuel joining us for the first time, Jeff Kolpack, and Mike McFeely. The Bison got things right today after North Dakota State beat Missouri State 38-10. The Zach Mathis and Cam Miller connection was strong today, Kolpack.
How about that? You know, a 6'7" guy, but, he's just not a possession receiver. And we talked about it after the game. And he goes, I'd like to think I have more to my game than just being a quote-unquote possession guy. Certainly was big, and especially on third down. I mean, that's when you make your money as a receiver. And I thought 2 touchdowns, first time a Bison receiver had 2 touchdowns in a game since Hunter Lipke did in 2021.
Scoring on their first possession, Mike, how big was that for the Bison today?
Well, it was a point of emphasis after last week against South Dakota. They started slowly and never really recovered, being down 21-3. This was a get-well game. It's the classic cliche. You lose a game, you have a couple of tough opponents coming up, and stuck in the middle is poor old Missouri State, which is in its post-Bobby Petrino era here. And they're just not very good. Their defense particularly was just not very good at all. And so NDSU did what it had to do. It scored early, got ahead, 14-0. Defense gave up some yards, with some passing. But, I mean, Matt Ed said after the game, if you give up 300 yards passing, you're still going to win the game possibly. If you give up 300 yards rushing, you're not going to almost for sure. And so NDSU just kind of got well. They have a big game coming up next week against UND up in Grand Forks, and they took care of what they could take care of today.
Cam Miller had 256 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle, how efficient was he today under center?
Yeah, well, it's just another day in the park for Cam Miller. Right? I should have started, by the way, saying thanks for having me, guys. First time being here.
Reserve judgment.
I appreciate it. Someone had to wear a tie.
Yeah, don't get too
still
excited.
Time to edit you out, so just be careful.
No, I mean, look, he just keeps doing it, right? I mean, he threw 1 pick last week, and everyone was, freaking out. He was still 18 for 25 a week ago, and all he does is complete passes. He's efficient. He's throwing them, some of them in tight windows, some of those throws to Zach Mathis. I like to think Zach Mathis is a guy, he's always open, right? He's 6'7". As long as you put it in a spot where he can go get it, he's going to. And Cam Miller, just like I said, it's just another walk in the park for him, completing, it seems like over 80% almost every single week.
Hard not to find him, especially because he can jump so high, too, on top of his length. I want to talk about defense, and I'll stick with the defensive guy. 4 turnovers today for the Bison. How good were they?
Yeah, they needed it, right? I mean, Mike touched on it. They gave up some yards. I think you knew that they were going to in a game like this, right? Missouri State came into the game ranked number 2 in the country throwing the ball, so you knew that they had some weapons. Raylan Sharp was outstanding. One catch away from breaking the record for tying the record for Missouri State, so you knew they were going to get theirs, but that's what Coach Jensen's talking about, right? The whole bend but don't break mentality. They did that today. They were opportunistic. I thought they did a good job of putting Bichot in some uncomfortable situations, making him scramble around. He's going to go back and look at the tape, I do think, and say there's a couple of those I just got to throw away or take a sack, but sometimes when those opportunities present themselves, you got to take advantage. That's what NDSU did here today.
Sharp almost got broken in half.
Yes. Oh, my gosh.
Talk about bend but not break.
By the way, that was a clean hit.
It was a clean hit.
There's no question.
And that was a big call, because if that was targeting, Cole Wisniewski would not have been. He would have been out the first half next week against UND. So that was a good reversal for NDSU.
Well, and also Cole was just so much bigger than him. He was just there at the right time.
Was the defensive line good enough, Kyle? I mean, is NDSU's defensive line? They got a sack late, I think.
Right. But I think it's going to be one of those things you got to ask Coach Gazer, like, okay, you're getting pressure, but how many times is that with blitzing? How many times it was stunting? And how many times you're just rushing 4 guys straight up, and are you affecting the quarterback? I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I still think you'd probably say there's a little bit left to be desired if you're, Coach Gazer and the defensive staff as a defensive line in terms of just winning one-on-ones. And we haven't broken down the film yet or anything like that, but I still think this group has a little bit more in them when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, they affected the quarterback enough to force him into some bad decisions.
Logan Kopp had his homecoming game today here at Missouri State, and what a game he had.
Yeah,
Kolpack.
in front of 60 friends and family, his parents, his grandparents, from St. Louis, 3 hours away. Sometimes just being home gives you a little extra juice. Obviously, he was just all over the field today. Reminded me of maybe the Eastern Washington game when he's all over the place, and he continues to be that linebacker. I think that can really be a difference maker, and they'll need to continue to have plays like that.
So the Bison are back on track, but they go up to Grand Forks next week. What are you hoping that they continue to build off of, Mike?
I can barely hear you because the leaf blower's over behind
yeah,
Kyle's shoulder. So I think you're asking
like
about UND or something. I think.
Yep.
Okay.
UND.
Yep. So this is one I've had, circled on my schedule as it was going to be a tough game, no matter what. I mean, I think we saw that a couple of years ago, that the Alara Center is going to be a tough place to play for NDSU because it's so loud, it's so small, And for the Fighting Hawks, it's the Super Bowl, Stanley Cup, and World Series Game 7 all wrapped into one. And so whatever UND has in the bag offensively, they're going to throw at the Bison. Whatever they have defensively, they're going to throw at the Bison. And I still don't know that this Bison team is so dominant like some of the teams in the past that they can go in any place and be guaranteed to win a game. And so I think NDSU is going to have to be sharp next week. They're going to have to have a good week of practice, to use coach speak. But I think it's going to be an awful tough go up there. And it's going to be a big game for both teams. And if you look at what's ahead, a win for NDSU, you kind of go, well, okay, they might go 9-2, they might go 8-3. And for UND with what's ahead, you go, well, if they win this game, they could be 9-2 or 8-3 with what's left in their schedule. And so besides the rivalry thing and besides UND so badly wanting to beat NDSU after all these years, just in terms of practicality, it's a huge game for both teams.
What about you, Kolpack? What do you think? Was that loud enough for you? Could you hear?
Well, I can hear. Yeah, I'm even older than him, and I can still hear. NDSU's run defense, I thought, was pretty good today. Although Missouri State came in not much in the running attack. I mean, Wright, the running back. I mean, 3 plays they held him on 1 yard, right, and turned it over on downs. You got to do that if you're the Bison defense next week against UND. You know, Belquist is so tough and so dynamic as a receiver. That's got to be, I think, going to be target number 1 for NDSU to try to stop.
Okay, Kyle, give us something you liked offensively that you want them to build on for next week.
I was going to say, talk about next week. And every time you talk about NDSU, it's, well, you got to stop the run. You got to stop the run. It's almost at this point. Well, obviously you have to stop the quarterback run. It's like Cole Payton got his today as well, but it's almost at this point, you got to slow down the passing game. You got to force Cam Miller to make some bad decisions. Just the 1 pick on the year, that's only their only turnover on the year so far. So I think it's almost, I don't want to say complete. I'm not going to completely flip-flop yet. You still obviously have to stop the run, but can you make Cam Miller be inefficient? Can you force some incompletions? Can you get him, in a situation where he's not scrambling for first downs when you finally do get to him? I think if offensively, that's what we've seen from NDSU so far. And if you're UND, that's something you got to slow down next week.
So the Bison get back on track as they get their first Missouri Valley Conference win. They're now 4-1. For Logan Campbell, what is your name? Kyle Emanuel?
There you go. Yeah, nailed it.
Yep. I was going to call you Mike McFeely. Yeah. Mike McFeely.
That's
Jeff
a really
Kolpack.
bad insult to him. I thought, wow.
At first it was going to be Eric Peterson because we normally have him.
Yeah, well,
so sorry for the
no
newbie.
comment.
Yep. I'm Logan Campbell. Thanks so much for watching the Bison Postgame Show presented by Gate City Bank.